Today we're going to learn how to draw a birch tree landscape with charcoal. We're going to use a charcoal pencil and also a piece of block charcoal. And we're going to start with just a horizon line, a line for where our trees are going to grow out of the ground. And then we're going to draw at least 4 long, straight, horizontal trees and try to make them varying sizes. Some skinny ones, some larger ones, some might curve to the side like the one I just drew. But leave a little bit of room for branches in between them as well. So now I'm going to start with my large branches, and they're kind of curved lines that come out the side of your tree, and they start a little wider at the base, the trunk of your tree, and they come to a point at the end. And they can be a little bit curvy, just as long as they go from thicker at the trunk and thinner as they move away from the tree. And make about 2 or 3 of these on each tree that you just drew, each tree trunk. All right, now we have the ground, the trunks of our trees, and the large branches. Now we're going to make smaller branches coming off of those large branches. So same thing, they're thicker when they hit the branch, and then as they go away, they get thinner to a point. And put about 1 or 2 coming off of each of those big branches. Now I'm going to make really small branches, and those are just one line coming off. And I like to make kind of a Y shape. That looks very branchy. Alright, so our branches are done, and now I'm going to use my block charcoal, and I'm going to make a shadow on one side of my tree. So I'm going to pretend that the sun is coming from the right side of my paper and hitting my trees, and so the shadow is going to be on the left side of my paper. So I'm making a dark shadow going up the trunk of each of those trees, the same side of each trunk. You see they're starting to look like birch trees. And this will give them some depth and make them look 3D. That's what the shading does. Now I'm adding a shadow to the bottom of my large branches. So the side that's closest to the ground, I'm going to add a shadow to those sides. And just on the large branches, because the small ones it's a little hard to add a shadow to. There's not enough room in those. And we might have to go back over some of these when we're done, because when we do the background and we smudge the background, these could get a little bit smudged out. So we might have to go back over them, but that's okay. Alright, so can you see the depth is starting in the tree? Now we're making the bark pattern of the birch tree. It's kind of like equal signs, 2 little horizontal lines moving their way up the trunk. And some are going to come out of the right side of the tree, some out of the left, and some are in the middle. So you can make it kind of random, because no 2 trees are the same. That's going to start to make it look like a birch tree. Alright, now I'm going to start working on the shadows that are underneath the trees. So remember, my sunlight is coming from the right side of my picture, so the shadows under my trees are going to go to the left. So they're going to go right under the trunk, and they're going to get darkest right where the trunk hits the ground is going to be the darkest part of the shadow. And then it's going to get a little bit lighter as it moves away from the tree. Once again, we're going to the left with our shadow, making it nice and dark right under the trunk, and then a little lighter as it moves away. Now it's really starting to pop out and look like a real 3D landscape. So now it's time to add the background, the sky. So I'm going to lightly, with the side of my charcoal, do a layer of gray in the background. Now don't worry about covering all the little cracks because we're going to go back and smudge it with a tissue or your hand. Tissue is a little bit easier and a little bit less messy, but some people like getting messy, and it's art class, so that's okay. But you're going to do a light smudge in the background. Try to avoid the branches, but we can also go back with our eraser and clean those up a little bit. So if you make a smudge somewhere you didn't mean to, don't worry about it. Alright, so my background is filled in with my first layer. So I'm going to take my tissue and I kind of ball it up so there's a point at the end. I think that's easier to smudge with. And I'm smudging that background so it looks a little more uniform, less scribbly, and more like a uniform sky. You might have to add a little more color some places where not enough charcoal hit. And then keep on smudging. Try not to smudge too much inside the trunk of your trees because birch trees are white, and like I said, you can use your eraser to get it out, but it's going to be hard if you smudge it all completely black. So I'm working around the trunks, trying to make that background nice and smooth. You can even smudge right over the shadow, kind of smooth that out. Maybe add a little bit more shadow in your tree, if it's a big tree especially. I think this is one of the most fun parts, getting to smudge the charcoal. Alright, now I'm just going to clean it up with my eraser a little bit. Anywhere that I got some charcoal in that I didn't mean to, I'm going to erase. And especially where those big branches hit the tree trunks, you might want to erase that line so it looks more realistic. You take your time with this. You don't want to ruin the wonderful work you just did. Alright, I think my landscape is almost done. A couple more details and there you go. You have your birch tree landscape.